All right, so we are getting ready to start the painting. As we probably discussed in class, this method is painted, everything that you see is painted in layers. First, we go for the darker colors, and then we add the middle tones. So the colors are not the lightest or the darkest, but the ones kind of in the middle. And then we add the lightest. So we paint from dark to light, and that is how we build form. So I'm going to go for, if I'm going to create like a sphere, a blue sphere, I'm going to go for my darkest dark first. So here comes a little bit of my blue, just a tiny bit at a time. Because as you will see, in the moment that we add the egg white on it, it is going to begin to dry very fast. And I am going to be working my brush in a way, so you're gonna need some paper towel in your hand, right here for me. Brush, you're gonna need to have handy your palette knife, and you're gonna need a little container with some water, some just clear, clean water. And there's your container. In my case, here's my egg Glair mix. Now, because I want my Glair mix to stay fresh a little longer, what I like to do is I like to put the Glair in a little top. And what I'm going to do, since I am working at an angle, I'm going to create a little bit of a sticky in the back of this top, so my top is not going to move. And in there, I'm going to get some of the egg mix so that I can grab it from here. And in that way, I can close my container with the egg white. So don't use the top that you're using for your container. But I can close my container and I can put my I can close it and I can put this with my egg white in the refrigerator. So the big body of the where the egg white is kind of staying fresh. So here is my little, I'm gonna move it actually a little bit over this way. Let's see if we need to move. Okay. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring maybe like 1 drop of water and mix it in with my little paste, right, that I have. Just very little, like. And make sure that that paste gets nice and dissolved in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some of the egg white mix and I'll mix it in. This is my Glair. Okay. And the beginning, depending on the pigment, most likely you are going to be dealing with pigments that sometimes you need to like really grind, because when you put the egg in, sometimes the pigments want to like disperse and separate, and then you grind the pigments against your egg white, if you see that happening. Okay, and there's my paint, and then we go into the brush strokes. So this particular technique will probably require 2 layers of your paint. I grab that brush and I'm only using the very tip. This is a 00. The very, very tip of, I don't know if you can see it well, of the paint. The brush strokes that I will be making are that thin. So I'm going to build the body of the color by overlapping. Okay? Everything is going to be done in thin layers of brush strokes. So if you grab it like this and you put it like this, that's not the technique. That's not what we want. And that has a certain look. For every picture that you show me of this technique, I am going to be very carefully examining and looking for brush strokes. And that is what the technique calls for. I'm also going to be laying down the brush in the way that this would have been shaded with pencil. In other words, what they used was contour hatching back in the day. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it before I show you this video. And the contour hatching, we know that it serves the purpose of creating lines that give me a sense of the surface quality. So instead of, brushing things up and down, I'm going to start the brushing of the paint in a way that is going to follow the form. So my paintbrush is going to be going around. And I'm going to avoid big bunches of paint. In other words, if I see that the paint, bunches up in an area, I'm going to move on it right away with my brush so that I don't have necessarily big blobs of paint. If I have mixed correctly the watercolor with the egg white, I will not have big little chunks of pigment, but if one happens to appear out, then I'm going to smooth it with my brush. And you will also see that as the color dries, it will change. You see me moving my brush as needed, right? So I am moving my brush almost as if I was touching a sphere, not a thin, flat piece of paper. Just making believe that I'm touching that surface in that particular way. And I'm going to cover all of it. Even if I have a highlight right there, and you might be tempted to leave that area white, this is not a watercolor technique. This is a very different technique. We cover our whites, we add them when we want them, when the other layers are ready for the whites, for the highlights. The first layer will look somewhat transparent, and we'll have lots of marks that you, even if you are being very careful with your brush strokes, very thin brush strokes, as you're supposed to, you will see little marks in there. Okay? I'm gonna take a picture of this so I can also include it as part of what you can expect. Okay? So that's my first layer. Here comes my second layer. Again, the first, right? And I also realized that, some of this is starting to get dry. Some of the paint is starting to dry. You'll see that there are whole areas are starting to dry. You cannot add water to it. You cannot add any more egg to it. Once it starts drying, then you need to have a new mix. And depending on your speed, I have done this before, guys, okay? So keep that in mind. And again, my brush strokes are like this. And I'm moving the brush as it's needed, right? To give me these different layers of lines, right? And again, I'm, you know, look at my finger and look at the brush stroke, okay? So just to give you an idea of how thin these guys are. And now I'm gonna go over everything a second time. The second coat will even out your lighter areas of blue and darker areas of the same pigment. Will even out. It will most likely give it a nice velvety look. You will not have so much the very yeah, I'm going fast. Once the paint starts dragging in here, then once it starts getting, you start getting a certain body to the paint, then, and I am pretty fast, guys, it looks like I'm gonna have to remix. Okay, so I am going to wipe my brush, put it in water for a little bit, and here it comes. So this, it has a couple of little parts that have moisture, but the rest of it, I can see it in my palette, is dull, it's dry, right? It's dry. So I need to start a different mix. How many minutes was that? 5 minutes. Okay. Not a ton, I don't need a ton, I just need a little bit more. And again, here comes, whoops, sorry. Here comes my water. Okay. Not a ton of water, guys. You don't want to water it down too much. So you control how much water you have in that palette knife. If you feel like you have too much water going in, you can go ahead and wipe it with your paper towel before you even touch anything. Then I put my egg in. I let it mix. It will look like the pigments are going, what is going on? We don't know, we want to be one with you, okay? And then you go ahead and you grind the egg white and the pigment together. Some of these pigments are more used to or not to mixing with other things. So you can expect some of them to happily become paint and other pigments not so happily. Okay, so you mix it in, and here I come, I get my brush, I get the extra water out of my brush, and I bring, again, the very tip, right? The top third of my brush is what receives the paint and what lays it down. And one of the important things when you're painting is you want to make sure that you're not going over the same spot too many times right away. We want to go over the paint once the paint has dried. If I have this area still wet because I just went through it and I was to come back with it, then I would start picking up paint. So things would get lighter in a way that I would not be happy with. So you want to remember that. You want to lay strokes and then move on to continue laying strokes. And if there's an area there that you really want to go over, you'll be able to. As soon as everything else around it dries, you'll be able to. Right. there is a little too wet, and I don't want to do what I told you not to do on purpose, so that you can see what happens when you make a mistake. I rather it. Okay, so recapping, guys, you know, we want those thin lines. If you get too much at the tip, so if the tip of your brush gets like a little globby, make sure to get that out. You want the tip of your brush to be like a little spear. Okay, that's gonna be what is going to be painting, you know, is that little spear that is going to give you that little line. Okay, so that's gonna be my first layer. Of nice blue. Okay, so it looks pretty solid. I'm gonna take a little picture, and I'm gonna let it dry, and then I'm gonna come back and bring some white. So we would have, this would be our dark, then we would go for a middle tone and then for white, or we can go into the dark and then put the highlight, and from the highlight lighten up into our middle tone, which is what I'm going to show you to do, and the exercise that I want you to try, since we are doing something fairly simple like the sphere, right? So that is going to be our next step, will be to bring some white in here. Okay,